I want to thank you all for joining us, and especially our guest speaker, Juan Carlos Zuazua, who is a rising star. I don't know, maybe you're not a rising star anymore. You've already risen. He is a risen star who continues to rise, but he is a luminary in the aviation business. The more I read about him, the more exciting things get. Juan Carlos is the CEO of Viva Aerobus, a well-known and increasingly well-known ultra-low-cost airline. Viva has grown very rapidly in Mexico and has since expanded in both Latin America and the US. And today it offers direct flights from many US cities to Mexico City and Monterrey, including Austin, I should mention. Mr. Zuazua has received numerous awards and accolades for his leadership. In 2024, he was named Airline Executive of the Year by the Center for Aviation, one of the most prestigious honors in global aviation. And that same year, he received an Airline Strategy Award from Airline Business for successfully growing Viva in a highly competitive market and implementing innovative, non-traditional strategies. He's also been recognized for his commitment to social responsibility and community impact. So we have many reasons for being excited about having him join us. Juan Carlos, welcome and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mendez and Pedro, for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here with you today.
All right. Well, so the way that we discuss doing this is that I have some questions for you, but we want to be sure to take questions from the audience as well. So we'll start with my prepared questions, and then we'll see what people have posted for us in the chat.
Perfect.
Good? All right. So my first question for you is your background, because knowing you not so very long ago, one might not have expected that you would end up in aviation. You studied industrial engineering as an undergraduate and public policy as a graduate student. And during college, you started a restaurant business. So how then did you end up in aviation? What do restaurants and airlines have in common?
Thank you, Dr. Mendez. I mean, they have a lot in common. I mean, number one, they are two industries that are in the hospitality landscape, right? At the end, both industries, they have to serve a customer. The only difference between potentially the airline industry and some part of the restaurant industry, that the airline industry is not a final product, meaning that we're in an intermediate service. We're moving people from point A to point B, but they have an ultimate goal, right? Going for a vacation or going for a family trip or gathering or whatever, right? And while a restaurant, if it's on the upper scale, you are the final product. People go for a restaurant for an experience, for a good night out, for a good dinner. And in other cases, if you're in the fast food landscape, potentially you're just an intermediate service, meaning that you're just serving for a quick lunch to get rid of the appetite and move on throughout the day. So, but in all cases, you're dealing with customers and you're dealing with people and providing a service, right? So that's the reason why I transitioned back then from the airline industry when I started, from the restaurant industry when I was at college, and transitioned throughout my master's degree, when we started this Mexican cantina in Monterrey, and then we opened a franchise in Madrid. But eventually, there was an opportunity to move on, and a startup was being found in Monterrey, which was named Viva, and it was an attractive venture to start with. And since then, 19 years ago, I'm doing this.
Well, you've obviously been very successful. Why does aviation make sense in Mexico? It's a very tough industry. And I recall reading that you commented that your biggest competitors are buses. So how is it that you've made it work in Mexico?
I mean, number one, aviation is an essential service, right, for humanity, and it's an important form of public transportation, different from other regions like in Europe or in Asia, in which fast trains have developed and have connected regions. Over here in North America, including the US, we don't have those fast trains, right? Because these are large regions. In our case, in Mexico, with a different type of geography. So we only have two public forms of transportation, meaning the bus or the couch or the air, right? So Mexico being a very big economy, right? 130 million population, give or take, a rising middle class. People in Mexico are trading from goods and services as the middle class grows. So this is a trend that we are seeing since 20 years ago when we started this venture. Just a little bit of background, but the majority shareholders of Viva are one of the biggest, largest bus conglomerates in Mexico, right? And they knew that the middle class customer will eventually trade up from the bus to the air. So as it happened in the US 40 or 50 years ago, when people were taking a Greyhound and suddenly they jump into a Southwest Airlines, right? Plane. So that's happening in Mexico. So we have 130 million people. Right now, around 55 million people take a domestic trip a year, right? A one-way segment. But close to 2.7 billion people take a one-way bus journey. So still the bus industry in Mexico is big. Is one of the three biggest bus industries in the world after India. China and Brazil close. Those are the four biggest markets for buses. So that's why we're bullish, and that's why we believe there's a good opportunity to trade up bus passengers to the air and connect more regions as we have been doing it for the last decade and a half.
Thank you. And that's so fascinating. And you're growing in Mexico and you're growing in the US very rapidly as well. And I have another question about that too. But I want to go back a little bit to the ultra low cost airline business model. So why has it been successful in Mexico? You touched on that a little bit, but how did that model translate into other markets you've moved into? Because, for example, the US, that is not the only model available.
100%, 100%. And look, I mean, the local business model has been highly successful worldwide. I mean, yes, it was potentially invented in the US with old late Herb Kelleher in Texas and founding Southwest Airlines, and then it was replicated in many fronts like the Ryanairs in Europe and many regions in the world. And in many other regions, the model has been adapted in a different way or so, depending the dynamics of the market. But at the end, why is this model important for a region like Mexico? Because we have a very price-sensitive consumer, right? We have a growing middle class, but unfortunately, we don't have the GDP per capita as you guys have in the US or in Canada or in any other developed nations. So the brands that have been able to succeed in developing economies such as Mexico are brands that have been able to have a cost leadership, meaning that they can offer a very affordable, reliable service or products. And that has been our case, right? I mean, in our case, people like to travel for any reason, and the reason they're traveling by bus is because that's their only alternative they can afford. But when you can offer a competitive service, which is 10 or 15 times faster, sometimes even cheaper, and of course much more safer, right? Because aviation is the safest form of transportation on earth. It's a no-brainer, right? So that's the reason why this model is important for a region like Mexico. Of course, there can be other alternatives, as you can see in the US, and you see the upper end, the Deltas and the Uniteds with a very good product and business class and lounges and of course the loyalty programs. But in Mexico, with Viva, we have brand new planes. We have a very competitive service. We have the loyalty programs, etc. So it's not that far apart, right? So having a 42% market share in a domestic market, I mean, we are a very relevant consumer brand, and we need to be very focused in offering a very competitive service, both in price and of course on-time performance and the quality of the service.
And were there differences in the other markets that you moved into? For example, the US. Obviously, it's a very different consumer market, as you mentioned, and how did it translate for you?
Yeah, surprisingly, it's not that different because in the US, such a big country, I mean, 300 and almost 50 million people, but I mean, you cannot target all of the consumers, right? So when we decided to enter the US, first we started focusing into Texas and then other states, but we were very clear in our strategy that we wanted to go and win with the Mexican and Hispanos living in this part of the region. Those are the ones that are going to be that need to be flying more often back to Mexico, to our cities we connect, because mostly we connect big cities in Mexico to important cities in the US. So the VFR travel was a key segment for us. And the second market for us was Mexicans that wanted to go for leisure to the US, right? So we already have them flying domestically. So we're putting them a flight to Las Vegas or to Austin or to Houston for a weekend getaway was an easy target. So that's where we're focused right now. Of course, we're getting also more often now with more flights that we're opening, accessing North Americans that wanted to come for leisure plans into Mexico. But understanding the consumer we were targeting at this first stage was important to be able to deploy our strategy in a more easier way. Of course, distribution channels are important in the US, similar to Mexico. Selling direct potentially without a big brand over there is hard, so we needed to rely on the typical OTAs like the Expedias or the meta search engines like the Kayaks to be able to have our brand there every time somebody was searching a flight from Texas to Mexico, the different cities. So that's the way we could connect there, and we have been successful so far.
Super. And these are relatively short flights, and not everybody has to fly business class, right?
Exactly.
So makes sense to me. And can you describe your international expansion a little bit, and into the US, but also other countries in Latin America? There are bound to have been some differences. You've mentioned the similarities in terms of your business model and so on. And of course, it's a globally regulated industry in some ways. But were there challenges that you encountered, differences that you encountered, whether those are regulatory, internally, or cultural, or what did some of those look like?
I mean, certainly there is a lot of bureaucracy and challenges because it's a highly regulated industry, as you can imagine. But I would like to start with, I mean, geographically speaking, Mexico is very well located for international travel. I mean, the reason why Mexico and the US are #1 trading partners in goods and services is because we are neighbors and we are very well located, and you can connect a lot of things. And that happens to aviation, right? So, I mean, 40 million people fly every year between Mexico and the US, right? For leisure, for VFR, for many reasons, right? Of course, for work. This is the biggest international air market in the world. 40 million people flying every year between these two countries. So that gives us a good opportunity to connect to the biggest international air market in the world, right? Of course, we need to, as explained earlier, we need to focus where to compete, where to play, and how to win. But apart from that, of course, regulators play an important role. Of course, we as any international business and a regulated industry, you need to comply with regulations. So when we decided to start flying, it was 2008. Our first international flight was Austin, Texas, from Monterey, and then the fuel crisis spiked back then in 2008. We canceled the service. But we decided to focus Texas as an entry point, and then we started going to several Texas cities, and then expanding to potentially 20 more destinations into the US and connecting several cities in Mexico. So the plan has worked so far. Of course, we also rely on the political landscape, meaning how are our countries and our regulators cooperating, right? And 2 years ago, Mexican Aviation Authority, the equivalent of the US FAA, was downgraded to Category 2 by the US FAA. That is a very rare event, but when that happened, pretty much all the Mexican airlines were put in pause. We could not grow into the US until the Mexican authority complied with a checklist. It had nothing to do with the safety of the airline, but it was simply lack of compliance between the regulators. So between 2 years, we were stuck without being able to grow while the US airlines were able to grow into Mexico. So finally, that ended 2 years ago. We announced during that phase an intention of doing one of its kind joint venture agreement with a US low-cost airline called Allegiant Air based in Las Vegas. We announced it almost 4 years ago. This was the first joint venture between two low-cost carriers in Mexico and the US. And it's been 4 years and two administrations, and the approval process is still pending. So it's a little bit frustrating. We're working hard with the two governments, but unfortunately, there's a political agenda right now that is putting this aside. But hopefully, we'll get this through because this is going to be highly beneficial for the US consumer. We're going to be connecting a lot of Mexican beaches, nonstop flight with small and mid-sized cities in the US, allowing US consumers to fly and take a vacation into the Mexican beaches like Puerto Vallarta, Los Cabos, Cancun, etc. So look, it's been a journey, right? But I mean, this is part of doing business international. I mean, the other alternative is doing what many airlines have done. For example, Southwest Airlines for 40 years, they only flew domestic. They didn't care about international flights, and there was so much business to do domestically. And we're growing domestic a lot, but we cannot avoid looking north, right? And the US is our biggest international opportunity. Apart from that, Dr. Mendez, we also fly into some countries in Central and South America, like Cuba, like Costa Rica, like Colombia. But it's a small service. We have like potentially 10 or 15 routes into these countries. Most of our international business is done north.
Thank you. And do you have plans for you're continuing to expand in the US very rapidly. Are you looking at other countries as well?
Potentially Canada, but look, we operate a fleet of A320s, 103 aircraft, A320s and A321. So it has a maximum flight range of 5 or 6 hours, right? I mean, but our average stage length is like 2 hours, a little bit less. So we like to do short flights so we can get more productivity out of the plane. So pretty much the US will be our main focus internationally, and there's still a lot of room to grow. Central and North South America potentially, and of course continue growing into Mexico. So I mean, there's still a lot in our playground, and we're excited in the future. We still have like 120 planes to be delivered, so there's a lot of growth in the next decade. So we're going to plan accordingly.
Super. And there's actually a very exciting announcement that we are able to make here at UT with regard to Viva. Starting in January, Viva has committed to providing up to 100 free airline tickets between Austin and destinations in Mexico for both faculty and students. Yeah, so there are many people in this audience who will be excited to know about that. So that's a very generous contribution. And can you talk a little bit about what motivated you to make this contribution?
Yes, Dr. Mendez. When we started talking with Pedro Lozada over a year and a half ago, and there were several visits with the prior dean of UT to Monterrey. We made several visits also into UT, and we realized that currently I live in Monterrey, but of course both Monterrey and Mexico City are important business destinations for the US. And we realized that Austin has a lot to offer as a community, and of course UT as a college, an institution, to Mexico. And we realized that even though Austin and Monterrey were very close in distance, we were very far apart in connectivity and in being able to connect the regions, right? So there was an effort recently also announced between the UT Texas and Monterey Tech on a very important health innovation, which we're also supporting them there. So anything we can do to allow trade to happen, to allow intellectual connectivity to happen between the faculties of both sides of the border, to allow students and entrepreneurs to move around between these two regions. I mean, we at least we could do something to foster these relationships and be part of this important business connectivity and intellectual connectivity that I think we should work harder to foster. And I think Texas and particularly UT play an important role with Mexico.
Well, thank you. On behalf of all of the faculty, but especially the students who will benefit from this program, I'd like to thank you. And this program is brand new, everyone. So details will be available soon. And the Center for Global Business website will make sure that we make an announcement about it and make the information available to you once it has gone through all of you were mentioning bureaucratic procedures. Well, that those exist in many places, and once they've the program is ready for formal announcement, it will be, but you heard it here first. I have just one more question for you before I start taking questions from the audience. So please, those of you who have questions, I'm sure you have many things you would like to know. Please begin posting your questions in the chat, and I will start looking there in a moment. But one thing that I would like to ask on behalf of our students, or perhaps anyone who is interested in doing global business who hasn't already, what sorts of skills do you think people need to be globally agile, be able to translate what they're doing from one environment to another successfully? What sorts of skills do people need, and what should our students be looking for?
Well, of course, I mean, there's a very simple skill, which if you can master a second language is a very important skill, right? I mean, if you like to compete internationally, right? So I know in Austin, there's a big community of people that speak Spanish and English. So I think those two languages mastered well and spoken properly can give you a good advantage. Number one, to start, right? But apart from that, I think regarding the region you would like to expand or compete internationally, I think traveling and understanding the region, in my experience, has been very important, right? Sometimes you think it's doing business internationally, it's easier, but sometimes until you go there, and sometimes you spend a couple of days talking to potential customers and walking the experience, it gives you a much better perspective, right? I mean, so trying to, of course, you can rely on a lot of information and with AI and get a lot of market research of the opportunities there, but I think that eventually, depending the business you like to explore or be part of, you need to feel it, right? So I mean, in our case, I personally spend a lot of time in the line. If you come to our offices, I'm here based in Monterrey Airport, and the reason why our headquarters are here is because every morning at lunch and the afternoon, I get to talk to passengers, right? And being able to talk to your front line, to your customers on a daily basis, you learn a lot, right? So So I think being very close to the action I think, is a very important skill that you need to develop, right?
Well, I love that answer, especially since I teach intercultural management, and that's the sort of thing I like to talk about as well. So, and by the way, the next time I'm in the line at the airport, I'm going to look for the CEO of the airline that I'm flying and hope I run into them. I don't think I'd put money on that, but I hold out hope now that I know that you're setting this excellent example. So let's look at some questions from our audience. So here's an interesting one because I know that you've talked about this in various contexts. How do partnerships or alliances play a role in Viva's expansion strategy? And how does Viva compete with already established global carriers in new markets?
It's a very important question. So the alliances are key for our growth. I mean, given that we have a very important domestic network, 40% market share, and we have an important footprint in many important regions like Monterrey, Guadalajara, Mexico City, Cancun, Tijuana. So we have developed a very attractive network for international carriers. For example, Iberia in Spain, that is the biggest international airline flying passengers into Latin America, right? They have like 3 daily flights into Mexico City. They announced a flight into Monterrey and Guadalajara. So we have a codeshare alliance with them to be able to distribute passengers in their long haul flights with our short domestic flights, right? The same thing we did with Avianca in Colombia, the same thing we did with Air Canada in Canada. Those alliances are already working. Emirates, we recently signed with them for their flight they have with Mexico City and Barcelona. And of course, we're waiting for the approval of the joint venture, which that's a different type of alliance because it's a metal neutral and we need antitrust immunity to be able to fly into nonstop between the Mexican beaches and small and mid-sized cities in the U.S. And why is that important? Because Allegiant is a loved brand in many of these small cities in the U.S., so they're going to be able to sell my product. In some cases, we're going to fly those flights. We're going to put the metal, and we're going to be able to complement each other, right? So these alliances, if you go into the history of aviation, they have been very successful. Some of these have gotten the ATI immunity, and they have been able to create a very good scale and competitive advantages, right? So that's the way we are working today, and those have been very important.
Super, thank you. Here's another question. Is there a reason your company chooses to use the Airbus planes instead of Boeing planes? What's the advantage for you there?
Well, we were a Boeing operator. We were born as a Boeing operator. Our pilots, we reached 25 aircraft as a Boeing. But eventually, back then, when we placed the order, we ran a competition between Boeing, Airbus, and Bombardier. Back then, the C series was also in play. But back then, simply Airbus was much more aggressive in winning our business, and we decided to transition to Airbus. And the rest is history. We have right now 103 planes, Airbus brand new planes. So that was a big win for Airbus. But both are very good aircraft, both the 737 MAX and the A320neo.
Super, thank you. We have a question about the pandemic and supply chain disruptions. So the pandemic obviously was so difficult for airlines, and you were not subsidized, if I remember correctly. So you had to compete with the airlines in, for example, the US that were being subsidized. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I remember that, and it was the worst year of my life. It was a very tough period. I mean, the industry went bust pretty much. Airlines around the globe were going bust. Very few countries in the world, like the U.S., provided a big lifeline for airlines. Meaning, in the U.S., $53 billion was the aid package to the airlines. I was serving as an independent director in a publicly listed airline in the U.S. called Sun Country Airlines, and so I was seeing how they were getting this support to pay the payrolls, and at the same time I was the CEO of a growing Mexican airline who we didn't get any support. But look, at the end, we can't complain because the pandemic, of course, it was a very tough crisis. We had already had some experience in 2009 with the H1N1 virus. It was a shorter pandemic. So we were fortunate to be able to prepare in advance for this crisis. We were like 3,000 employees back then. All of the employees teamed up. We reduced our salaries. We knew we needed to act together. We worked together with our lessors, with our creditors, and we came out fine, right? At the end, the industry, people needed to travel back again. I mean, this was an industry that people will not decide to do something else. So we just needed to play together during those tough months. And 2021, we were back on our feet. And back then, we have continued growing. So it was a very tough time. And of course, then the aftermath is the supply chain disruption with all the OEMs like Airbus, Pratt and Whitney, etc., with all the problems they have had, and we have been still impacted with all the aftermath of the pandemic. But it was a very tough year.
Well, thank you. And you certainly have rebounded, and that's lovely to see. I noticed a very relevant, important point that I think we're all thinking the same thing. Sometimes someone makes a question or a comment that we can all identify with. And this person is pointing out that you have one of the best office backgrounds ever. So thank you for sharing that with us. My only question is who's flying the plane? But in any case, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm flying the company, but I'm not a pilot. But I have over 1,000 pilots that are very qualified to fly in their planes.
All right. So let's see. Oh, well, here's an interesting one. What's the toughest decision you've had to make as a CEO?
Well, I think there's several. One in 2008, the only time we have had an employee reduction, right? We were in a significant crisis. We were a very small company, and we need to reduce our staff in 10%. So firing 10% of the people was very tough, right? Of course, we needed to do that to survive. And I think the second one was in the pandemic, asking 3,000 employees that that was March, late March. I went to all the bases. We had 5 bases, and asking them, guys, we're entering another pandemic like the one in 2009. We don't know how long it's going to last. The only thing that I know is that if we act together and work as a team, we can get out of this together. And I needed to ask everybody, instead of going back and making a staff reduction, I needed everybody to put to take 50% of their salaries a salary cut, right, indefinitely, to help us go out. Of course, senior executives took an 85% cut. So it was tough, right? And of course, if anybody wanted to leave, we will pay in full. But no one left. Everybody stood. Unfortunately, after a very good year in 2021, and we recovered, our board approved to pay every single cent back to the employees. I mean, they were not expecting the salary payback, right? But it was a good act of gesture because we got their support. So I mean, I think most important decisions are based on people, right? And of course, tough times require, that's when you get the best outcome of your people.
Wow. I think if I change industries, I know where I might head. So 2 people have asked this, so I'm going to ask you, do you think that having an engineering background has helped you in this industry?
I don't know. Look, I mean, the engineering background at the end just gives you some certain type of wiring in your brain in how to structure your decisions. But I mean, I think airlines are run also by very strong by finance people, etc. After engineering background, I needed to study a little bit of finance and business in my own time, because at the end you need to complement yourself. So I don't think it gives you an advantage. Of course, we have a lot of engineers on the maintenance and engineering side, but at the end you need to face your customers, and you need a lot of creative people with other set of backgrounds, right? You have a regulated industry. You also need people who know to deal with governments. So at the end, how I see our team is that you need to have people with all sort of expertises that can act together and play the best game ever, right? And just maintain a good championship tip level to be able to win every day.
All right, thank you. Here's an interesting question. There's so many good questions here, and I'll just go back and forth. If I didn't ask your question, I may get back there, but this one is, given Viva's rapid growth, how do you ensure that company culture and customer experience remain consistent across different markets? Because I'm assuming that you're not there to greet customers in line everywhere you operate in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tough. Well, you grown right now. We're over 5,000 employees, but we try to stay very close to our people. Of course, I cannot visit every base every day, but with technology, we are very active in talking to them, even throughout videos, messages, live chats. I mean, we can get into a Zoom with 500 people every other week, and of course, having good leaders that can walk the talk, and of course, that can be physically in all of the regions we fly. That's important. Of course, the corporate culture in Viva is very important, and that's something we feel very proud, because at the end, that is part of the competitive advantage we have, that make us different, right? And the low cost mindset, and we call it the founder's mentality. I mean, people willing to go the extra mile every single day to do good for the company or for a customer. And customer service, on your second question, Dr. Mendez, I think is very, very difficult in this industry. I mean, to be honest, it's an industry, as any other industry, which is a B2C, meaning that you have that contact with the final consumer. And when you are not the final product, meaning that people expect you will fly always on time, and you will take them on time from point A to point B. You need to be super good on having a very good product, meaning people want to get there on time, and most important, they're expecting to fly or to spend the least amount of money possible, right? So part of the customer service experience, of course, being able to offer very competitive fares, being able to fly them on time. At least 85% of the flights depart on the minute, and also allowing them with their technology to be able to navigate through all the booking process, through the checking, through the boarding, through the flight, and through baggage delivery, and be able to self-serve themselves if there's any complication with their flights, right? So technology has been a huge part of our customer service strategy, but it's a difficult task, right? I mean, particularly for this industry, and that's something we pay a lot of attention, right? Understanding the frictions in every single pain point we have throughout the journey, and try to fix them, right? I mean, at the end, it's a service, and we need to try to do it as best as possible.
All right, thank you. Here's one that's more about nuts and bolts. Given the volatility in the Mexican peso and oil prices, how do you manage foreign exchange and fuel risk?
Well, we hedge a lot. We have 75% of our costs are dollar based, so and around 75% of our revenues are pesos, right? So naturally we are actively hedging. We have a head of treasury with a dedicated team actively hedging with different instruments. And similar, we do some hedging in a lower amount on oil, right? Fortunately, right now the price of fuel has behaved and is very competitive, meaning the prices have not spiked. But look, this is part of our industry, right? I mean, FX and oil is our everyday, right? If there's a a crisis in North Africa, suddenly the fuel will spike, and so on, right? So that's part of our business.
All right. Thank you. And I'm not sure you can answer this, but it's a very nice testament to your technology. You have a very friendly app that accepts many options to change routes, passengers, flight dates, and resell tickets. Why don't other airlines do that?
Yeah, look, I mean, that is part of the customer service challenge I was mentioning earlier. We spend a lot of time talking to our passengers to understand which are the pain points. And unfortunately, the airline industry is very unflexible, right? Meaning the airline, normally traditional airlines, they sell you a ticket and they assume you will fly on that given date. And if you change your plans, it's your problem, not the airline's problem, right? So the airline will only collaborate with you if the airline is changing your plans, right? Because they are mandated or regulated to do so. If they cancel your flight, they need to give you a compensation, etc. So we call this flexibility, with a capital letters on the S and the I, meaning sí or yes in English. So we have like an internal yes culture with our front line to try and tell all of our people, guys, we're in the business of telling yes to our passengers, right? And providing technology to be able to solve a lot of pain points for our passengers to be able to do it themselves. And anytime they decide they are not going to travel, in many other airlines, they will lose that flight. We give them a lot of options, right? You can change the name, you can transfer it, you can sell it, you can put it in a marketplace, etc. This is no different than when you buy a ticket for a match or a concert and you decide you're not going to go, you can go to StubHub and sell it, right? So this is a service we launched over a year ago, and we're implementing new functionalities, trying to hear our customers, and that in our opinion has been very positively received, and more customers are using this type of self made functionalities.
Thank you. So I already mentioned that you have won an award for eco-friendly practices. And we have a question here about how you implement that sort of practice while keeping your prices low. And I'm going to add making a profit.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end, this is an industry that contributes with 3% of the global pollution, right? I mean, potentially it's a very big number or not, but we need to move a very big machine from point A to point B, and we need to burn some gas. So we are conscious about that. I mean, Viva was #1 airline in Latin America adopting the newest engine technology from Pratt & Whitney, a US-based manufacturer, which reduces significantly the fuel consumption, right? Apart from that, we have been actively in procuring sustainable aviation fuel with third parties in the US, because in Mexico is still not well developed. We're actively promoting this with a regulator, and we're implementing many other practices to reduce our carbon footprint, right? Of course, allowing our passengers to contribute with their flight, and we will contribute all this amount to special projects. So I think it is a moral obligation we as airlines or as business have to our environment. So at least we need to be doing our best efforts possible, right? And pushing every single regulator and every single manufacturer to move faster towards decarbonization. And in the process of doing so, at least we should be feeling proud that we are doing everything that we have in our hands, right? Of course, we have a lot of activities of recycling and many other things, potentially with minor impact, but at least that's something we feel proud as an organization. And you can look into the eyes to every single employee and to every single passenger, guys, we're doing the best we can, right? Yes, we can do more, but we need the support of the regulators or the plane makers or the engine manufacturers, etc., right? So That's our approach.
Super, thank you. Have the recent tariffs, and I would add sort of trade frictions of various types, affected the cost of getting your planes or any other aspects of your company? Because there are many things that you do and have that are sourced from abroad.
Yeah, we have not had a direct cost implication, meaning that the cost of air travel is exempt of these tariffs, or also the planes we buy, etc. Fortunately for now. But I think the biggest implication is that while there's this trade dispute worldwide, and also the Mexico-US MCA renegotiation, and of course some tariffs in some goods and services between our two countries, some prices have increased, and also the economy have slowed down, right? So meaning that when there's a slowdown in the economy, some consumers, they start reducing their non-essential travel, and that will eventually impact us, right? So yes, we are seeing that, and unfortunately that's impacting not only us but also US airlines. But hopefully we are hopeful that our two governments, which are the biggest two trade partners, will eventually get to a good outcome on these negotiations, as we need to ensure we have a very prosperous trade region, which is North America, #1 in the world.
Thank you. We have a question from someone who works for Embraer. Actually, I'm joking. I don't know that that's the case, but they are asking whether you have any thoughts on Embraer's E2 jets, and might they realistically join your fleet given Airbus delivery backlogs?
Yeah, we've studied it. Actually, the Embraer guys were recently in our office. I mean, it's a super aircraft. Of course, it's a much smaller aircraft than the ones we are flying. We have 180-seater and 240-seater, so we have very, very, very big planes for narrow-body aircraft. These are closer to the 140 seaters. But I think it's going to be a very successful program. I mean, recently one US airline selected them, Abello. I know their CEO well, Andrew Levy, and I'm seeing more orders coming into place. In our case, we still have a pipeline of Airbus planes to be delivered, but we have not discarded if we decide to go for a smaller aircraft in the future.
Thank you. And here's another one. Your company is well known for having one of the youngest fleets, which means the newest equipment, the newest aircraft, right, in North America. And how do you evaluate the trade-offs between fleet modernization and capital cost, especially given uncertainty with regard to demand? And how are you going to innovate to make sure you stay successful? Those are the questions.
Yeah. It's a very difficult question. I mean, and you need to take that decision when you decide to purchase a brand new aircraft order. So we're already pregnant, right? Meaning that we already committed a huge capex with a huge order, because we believe that we can maximize the benefits of flying brand new planes with the productivity has, the maintenance honeymoon, and being able to have this kind of technology, right? Of course, then the challenge after buying the planes is how would you finance them? So you need to be very creative, tapping into international markets in Europe, in Japan, in China, in the US. We're actively talking to all the big financiers that want to finance our aircraft, right? So the cost of ownership is one of the biggest challenges for airlines. Is fuel and aircraft cost is the two biggest costs for an airline, period, right? So that's a very big challenge, and that's something we're actively working into it. But most important, you need to be on the commercial perspective. You need to be confident that you are going to be able to fly a brand new aircraft 12 hours a day, right? So you need to be comfortable with your growth expectations, both domestic, international, and that's something we feel very, very, very comfortable and bullish still.
Thank you. Here's a question. Would you consider adding low-cost cargo or mail planes as part of your business model, especially globally?
Yeah, we are doing right now, we call it Viva Cargo. We are offering up to 2 tons of cargo or mail or small packages in our bellies, in our commercial flights, in most of the cities we fly. So pretty much we are, but this is not a B2C segment, it's a B2B. So we're working with a third party. Pretty much we are selling the belly cargo, and it's an intermediary who is working with many of the e-commerce platforms, etc. Right? So plenty of the e-commerce products that are delivered in Mexico, many of those are transported in our commercial flights every day.
Great, thank you. Here's a question about AI. We're bound to get a question about AI, right? So how do you see your company changing with AI and technological advances?
I think it's a huge bet. I mean, not only AI, but many of the Industry 4.0 technologies. I mean, AI, we've been adopting several initiatives. One of those, I believe one of the most important ones is the predictive maintenance, meaning as we're flying machines, they tend to fail and you need to change some components every other day. So the holy grail of airline maintenance is knowing in advance when a component is going to fail, so you can have another one in stock and just replace it overnight before you have an aircraft on the ground, right? So that's something we've partnered with Palantir. Perhaps you heard that the name of that company, and with Airbus over 8 or 9 years ago, and we're very excited on the outcomes, right? I mean, because that allows us to have a lot of aircraft uptime. And in the commercial department, we also implemented some initiatives, particularly on the way we are tailoring our ancillary revenue offering based on passenger profiles, on revenue management, some initiatives with a company called Fetcher. I believe Delta Airlines is also using them on how we optimize pricing. So, I mean, we're trying here and there many initiatives with third-party specialists. At the end, I think most important for the AI revolution is just having the mindset open, being able to test, try. If it works, you double down. If it doesn't work, just kill it. So I mean, I think we're starting a new evolution, and most of us are learning about this, but at least we're trying constantly and trying new initiatives.
Thank you. Well, we are at the end of our time. I think we have time for one more question. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you wish I had, or that someone from the audience had? And if not, I have one more for you.
Please, in many lectures, they always ask me, what am I reading right now? I don't know why, but that's like the typical question.
Well, of course we need to know this. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book called The Human Element. It's a book. It's the second time I read it. I like it. It's from a good friend, a professor, David Shontel from Northwestern Kellogg University. It's very good for people who like to understand the friction theory and understanding pain points in the business you deliver, right? So it has a good framework on understanding how to reduce frictions and understand how your customers think. And it's a good lecture. So I highly recommend it.
All right, thank you for that. And then the question that I'd like to end with is a personal question. Is there any one part of your journey that you wish you could redo?
Of my professional journey or overall?
Oh, I think overall, we're interested in all of it, but yeah, maybe your professional journey especially.
No, I don't have any regrets on my professional journey, to be honest. I'm a happily married, a father of 4 kids, and knowing how time consuming is being a parent of 4 very young kids, I would have married much younger.
Okay.
But look, I enjoy it. I have the time. I dedicate the time every day, and that's the reason I work for, right, for my family, right? So that's an important part of my life.
So thank you very much. So students, now you know the secret to a happy career. Marry young so that you have the energy to raise those kids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you, everyone in the audience. Great questions. Juan Carlos Zuazua, we are so grateful to you for joining us and for sharing that fascinating information, both on the strategic side and the operational side, and also on the human side.
Muchas
Greatly
gracias.
appreciated.
Muchas
Thank you.
gracias.